Straight Shift with the Car Chick, the podcast that's all about cars, buying, selling, fixing, and driving, and sometimes pretty fast if you're the car chick. Now, here she is.
Welcome, everyone, to the Straight Shift. Today, we are going to talk about those dashboard lights. You know, those cryptic little icons that crop up on your dashboard when something is wrong with your car. For a lot of people, those can be very stressful because they're not sure exactly what they mean. How critical are they? Is it still safe to drive my car when it comes on? Or do I need to stop now and call a tow truck? It can be very stressful for people, and it doesn't necessarily help when you don't fully understand what they mean. So I want to try and go through the top 5 warning lights that could crop up and talk to you about what they do mean, what could the possible causes be, and how you should react to them, whether you should stop right now, pull over to the side of the road, or if it's okay to proceed home or to a repair station. I know a lot of people, as we're heading into these holidays, are going to be going over the river and through the woods to grandmother's house or visiting other friends and relatives for the holiday season. And there's nothing more stressful than being on the road and having one of these lights come on. So I do want to say that the best way to prevent yourself from seeing one of these pesky lights is to be sure to get your car in to a shop or a dealership for a pre-road trip safety inspection. Just have them look over everything, make sure your car is in good shape, and please schedule that appointment about 2 weeks before you plan to travel, not like the day before or even a couple days before, because that way if the shop does find something that needs to be repaired, they have time to order the parts if necessary and then get the work completed and then have you drive it around town for a couple days just to make sure that everything is good. And that way you will be all safe and ready to have the hopefully least stressful possible road trip with your family for the holiday season. But let's start with these dashboard lights. The first one I want to talk about is the brake warning light. This one looks like a little exclamation point sitting inside a circle, sitting inside parentheses. Now, I know that sounds really weird, but what it's supposed to look like is the little circle is supposed to represent your brake rotor, which, guess what, is a circle. And then the parentheses represent your brake pads on either side of that rotor that compress against it when you hit the pedal and cause the car to stop. So if that warning light comes on, you need to pay close attention to it because brakes are just something you don't mess with. Like I said, they help stop the car. The brakes stop the wheel from rotating, and then the friction between the tires and the road cause the car to actually come to a stop. So if there's something wrong with your brakes, it can be a very serious safety hazard. Now, depending on how new your car is and even what brand of car it is, it may have some different kind of brake lights. Frequently, if you have an old style, and I'm calling this an old style now because everything's changing with parking brakes, they're all electric now, which is just scary and a totally different topic. But, I still have a normal, hand brake, parking brake, whatever you want to call it, because I drive a manual transmission car. I have 3 pedals and I don't have a park gear like those of you with automatics. So I have to pull that parking brake every time, I stop the car. That's how I keep it from moving on me when I get out of the car. So if sometimes you haven't gotten that parking brake or handbrake fully disengaged, that brake warning light may come on. A lot of the time, your car may actually have a separate light for the parking brake, and it might be a little P inside the circle, inside the parentheses. But if that light comes on and you've checked it's not your parking brake is fully disengaged, but you still have that brake warning light on, there's a couple different things that could be. It may remain on if the switch on the brake pedal or the parking brake pedal, the lever is misadjusted, or it may be nothing to do with the parking brake at all, but in fact, something wrong with your actual brakes. Now, if the light comes on when you apply the brakes, or if it's on continuously, one thing it could be is that you're losing hydraulic pressure on one side of the brake system, or maybe the fluid level in the master cylinder has gotten dangerously low due to a leak somewhere in your braking system. In either case, the fluid level in that master cylinder needs to be checked, and that's something that a mechanic is going to have to do. You might be able to get away with topping off brake fluid, top off that master cylinder reservoir, but that's not going to solve the problem because brake fluid doesn't just magically vanish from your car. So if you're low on brake fluid, it means that there's a leak somewhere, there is something wrong in the system, and you need to get that diagnosed to figure out what is going on. Because if you don't have brake fluid, what brake fluid does is your brakes are hydraulic systems. So that fluid is what causes pressure and allows the calipers to squeeze and then press the brake pads against the rotor to stop the wheels. So if you don't have that fluid, what happens is very often you'll press the brake pedal and it'll go all the way down. And, it might feel squishy. There's, a lot of different ways that it can feel, but it's not that nice, firm brake pedal that it's supposed to be. That means there's something wrong with the fluid typically. So if that brake warning light comes on, don't mess with it. Get yourself over to a good ASE certified shop or your dealership and have them find out what is wrong. Because if you don't have brakes, your car doesn't stop. It's a real good way to get into an accident and risk your life, the life of your family, and the life of other people on the road. So don't mess with the brakes. Get them checked out. The next one is the temperature warning light. This is the one that looks like a little thermometer floating on a river. And this is also a very serious light. When the temperature light comes on, it means your engine is overheating. There's also a little gauge on there for your engine temperature, and you should watch that as well. It should never really get above the halfway mark. Your engine has a cooling system, and you have coolant in that system. That's another fluid. It's typically a 50-50 mixture between that coolant, or up north they call it antifreeze, and water. And that filters through the system and helps keep your engine cool. So even if the temperature is hot, it's summer, or you live in Arizona where it's apparently over 100 degrees all year round, according to my friends that live there, and you're in stop and go traffic, that's hard on your engine. Even under those circumstances, unless it's just really crazy, hideously hot, your car's cooling system should still work. If you've got a big truck and you are towing something really heavy under those conditions, you can start getting into some cooling problems. But typically, vehicles with heavy-duty towing packages also have additional cooling fans and other parts of the system that help keep the engine cool under those extreme conditions. But, for the average person with their average vehicle, the cooling system should do its job. So if that temperature warning light comes on, you have a serious problem. I actually had this happen to me many years ago. We were actually up in Ohio for my dad's memorial service, and I had another emergency happen back in Charlotte, and we had to drive home. And even though I did get a pre-road trip inspection on this car, that shop either didn't find the problem or the problem just happened to crop up randomly, but we were losing coolant. And I did not have time to just stop and find some unknown shop, between Cleveland and Charlotte on I-77 to do this repair. I had to get home. So I'm driving this minivan and I am going down the Virginia Turnpike, trying to keep the car over 55 miles an hour to get enough cool air flowing through the radiator to keep the engine from overheating. It has got to be the most stressful driving I have ever done. And you just don't want to get into that situation. So, if that temperature warning light comes on and or you start seeing that temperature gauge get above half and start sneaking up there, you definitely have a problem. In my case, there was a leaky water pump and we had to replace the water pump. It can be a variety of things. So what you want to do when you see your engine's overheating, or if that light comes on, pull over, stop. Do not continue. Do not pass go. Wait till the car cools down. You can pop the hood to help it cool down faster, get some airflow underneath your hood, but don't touch anything under there because everything's really super hot, and you definitely do not want to start opening up the coolant reservoir and looking in there. It actually says on the cap, don't open, when it's hot, contents under pressure. You will seriously injure yourself. So just let the car cool down completely. Then you can, if you want, check the coolant level, check that coolant reservoir. You may be able to top it off with some water. Or water and antifreeze mixture if you're in a place where it's cold, and be able to limp it to a shop. Otherwise, call AAA, call your roadside assistance, call a tow truck, and have it towed, because you just don't want to risk, if that engine overheats, it performs what we call a spontaneous high-speed disassembly, meaning things start to go bluey. This happened in our race car a few years ago, and it's common, unfortunately, to happen in race cars because the engine is under such extremes. We're constantly, running it at the red line and just really pushing the engine to its limits. And some things things go bluey. So you don't want that to happen in your regular street car. Having to rebuild or replace an engine is extraordinarily expensive. So if you see that temperature warning light, the little thermometer floating on a river, it means stop, let the car cool down, call a tow truck so that you can get that checked out. Little factoid, the only vehicle that I can think of off the top of my head that can be safely driven when that temperature warning light is on is the late model Cadillacs that still had that North Star V8 engine. The Cadillac engineers designed the engine control system for that particular motor to automatically deactivate half of the cylinders in the engine if it sensed an overheating problem. Because what that did was, with fewer cylinders working, the dead cylinders were not contributing to the heat, but they were also able to pump additional air through the engine to help cool it down faster. It was kind of neat. It basically put the car in a limp-in mode. You had absolutely no power, but you could limp it to the shop under those circumstances and not have to be towed. And I think it happened a lot on those engines, which is why they designed it that way. But very few people have those engines anymore. So just kind of an interesting little factoid. Nobody else does that. So just don't mess with it. If your engine starts to overheat, stop, call a tow truck, and just know that you're probably going to have an expensive and not so fun day. Another one that you definitely are going to see probably at some point in time if your car has this is the tire pressure monitoring system light. This is the one that looks like a little exclamation point that is sitting in a cauldron with a fire underneath it. Really what it's supposed to be is kind of like simulates looking at a tire and the little fire is your tread and it's kind of sitting low because you don't have enough air in it. But I really think it looks very much like a cauldron with a fire underneath it. So the tire pressure monitoring system, most modern cars have these. And so if you have a car that has it, it will depend on how the manufacturer has designed that system to work. Some of them only monitor all the tires at once. So when the light comes on, it could mean there's something wrong with the tire pressure in any one of the tires and you get to guess which one. It won't tell you specifically. The more modern ones, especially on the most expensive cars, they have one per tire. So it will actually tell you which tire has the problem. And what they typically do is the manufacturers will set a parameter of the air pressures can be anywhere from here to here. And if the pressures fall outside of that, either too low or too high in some cases, it will trigger that little light and let you know, hey, we got an air pressure problem. Is that something that you need to stop driving? No, not necessarily. You just do want to get to a gas station or service station fairly quickly and check your tire pressures and make sure you get the right amount of air in there. This light can be going off a lot this time of year, especially here in Charlotte. We've just now started to see actual fall temperatures. One day it can be 80 degrees and the next day it's 40 degrees. It's just kind of how we roll down here. And with that sudden drop, if you have normal air in your tires, not nitrogen, when it gets cold, the air compresses. And so now you actually have less air in your tire than you did yesterday when it was warmer. So it can be very frustrating. That's why a lot of the dealers and service stations recommend that you put nitrogen in your car if you live in an area with kind of varying temperatures. And that's definitely a good idea. Nitrogen's a little bit more expensive, but it saves you the headache of having to deal with your air pressures going up and down in your tires and having to manually manage that by adding and releasing air from your tires. I always recommend when you check the air in your tires, you do it with the same air gauge every time. Don't use the one that comes on the air pump at the gas station. I guarantee that does not work. It's a terrible system. They're never calibrated. Half the time you can't read them because they're so old. I have just a little $8 round, it almost looks like a stopwatch pressure system that I picked it up for like $8 at my local AutoZone or Advanced Auto Parts. Can't remember which, but and I just keep it in my glove compartment and I use that every single time I check my tire pressures, and that way I know I'm using the same gauge. It's calibrated the same way, so at least I'm going to get a consistent reading. So that's always a good idea to do. Or you can just take it to your repair shop and say, hey, I just need some air in my tires. A lot of times shops won't charge you for that or won't charge you very much. It's a courtesy thing that they do. And you can always decide to switch over to nitrogen if you don't want to deal with that tire pressure light. The tire pressure light, they want you to know when your air pressures are low, because that does a couple things. One, when your air pressures are low, That means more of the tread of the tire is in contact with the road. And when it's more than it should be, you're getting more friction. And that means your car's just kind of like dragging itself down the road, kind of like I feel when I get up in the mornings and I'm kind of dragging my butt down the hallway. Your car's doing the same thing. And the more friction means you're going to get worse gas mileage. If that air pressure gets too low, what happens is the weight of the vehicle starts compressing the tire, and what gets compressed are the sidewalls. The sidewalls are the weakest part of the tire. So if they compress too much, they can blow out, and then you've got a tire blowout, and that's very likely to cause an accident and risk, injuring you and your family and others around you. So, be sure you keep on top of those tire pressure lights and make sure that your air pressures in your tires are always set at the proper level, even maybe 1 psi above. If you live in an area, like Charlotte, where we have potholes the size of moon craters, and that just little bit of extra air gives you some cushion from getting your tires dinged, especially if you have low profile tires like I do. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the genie lamp and the all evil check engine light. We'll be right back after this. Do you hate car shopping? Do you worry about being taken advantage of, or about finding the right car at a fair price? Buying a car can be a frustrating and time-consuming experience. But what if you could get a great deal without having to do a ton of research, without having to haggle, and without the fear of buying a lemon? You can. As your personal car shopper, the Car Chick will help you pick the perfect car based on your unique lifestyle, budget, and personality. She'll handle all of the legwork and negotiating for you. All you have to do is sign the papers and take the keys. It's that easy. To learn how the Car Chick can save you time, money, and hassle on your next car purchase, give us a call at 888-575-2138. That's 888-575-2138. Or visit us on the web at thecarchick.com.
The Car Chick is back for more Straight Shift.
Welcome back to the Straight Shift. We are talking about those dashboard lights, those crazy cryptic looking warning lights that are in practically Egyptian hieroglyphics that come on your dashboard when something is wrong with your car. And right before the break, we were talking a lot about the tire pressure monitoring system light, that little exclamation point that looks like it's sitting in a witch's cauldron over a fire. One more thing I wanted to say about that before we move on is if you have recently had your brakes done or your tires replaced and you notice that light's on, there is a possibility that the technician didn't reset the tire pressure monitoring system after they did that. That system, because it's linked to, it's a little sensor in each of the tires, that sensor has to either be replaced or at least re-plugged in, so to speak, after you have brake work or your tires replaced. And occasionally the technician will forget to do that. So if that's the case, take it back and make sure that they reset that properly. But the next light we're going to talk about is the oil pressure warning light. This is the one that looks like the little genie lamp with a little droplet coming out of it. So your genie lamp is leaking. The oil pressure warning light, it can mean one of two things. Either your engine has dangerously low oil pressure, which means it's probably going to blow soon, or the oil pressure sending unit that triggers the warning light has failed. The first one is really, really bad. Obviously, the second one can be annoying. If this light comes on, do not keep driving. And also look at the oil pressure gauge on your car, because it has a gauge and you can see what the level is on that. But you want to stop immediately, let it sit for a few minutes to cool off, and then get out and check your oil level. If the oil level is low, it means your engine is either leaking oil or burning oil, neither of which are a good thing. So you need to have that diagnosed and repaired by a certified mechanic. You can temporarily add some oil to bring the level back up to the full mark and the light may go out, but don't think that you've necessarily fixed the problem. It's possible that you have a slow leak and it just finally got down to being too low. Usually in that case, you will have seen some droplets on your driveway or in your garage to indicate that you've got an oil leak. If it's burning it off, that's happened on several cars. On the old Mazda RX-8s where the rotary engines were famous for burning oil. One of the reasons that they quit making that. But if you're losing oil, it means that there is most likely a leak somewhere, one of your seals or gaskets, and there are several that it could be leaking from. That's why you have to have it diagnosed by a mechanic, and they'll be able to run some tests to see how bad it is, where it's coming from, and know which seal or gasket or multiples need to be replaced to stop that oil leak. So, make sure that you get it in to your mechanic as soon as possible. You don't want, hopefully you haven't been running it for a long time, because if you run on low engine oil, it's going to significantly damage your engine. This is what happened to us a number of years ago in the race car when we were at Barber. For those of you who've heard my keynote speech about lessons from the racetrack, overcoming epic failure. The epic failure was our engine blew up because we had an oil starvation issue in our fourth cylinder. So anytime we took hard or sustained right-hand turns, the oil was flowing away from the fourth cylinder and starving it. So there was no oil in there, which caused everything to overheat very quickly. And literally our number 4 piston exploded. We're talking serious high-speed spontaneous disassembly here. And so, obviously that brought an abrupt end to our day, and you don't want that happening in your car either. So, check that oil level. If the dipstick shows a full oil level, after you've let it cool off and you've checked it, but that light is still on, then it's possible that the oil pressure is low because of a faulty oil pump. The oil pressure may even be fine, but the sending unit has failed. You could have a bad sensor. There's a lot of things that can be causing this, and it can be really frustrating to diagnose if it's not, the obvious answer of, yes, there is in fact an oil leak. So it is just not worth risking the damage to your engine. I actually have a very frustrating problem with Maggie that's been going on for years. Her oil light will intermittently come on. And we have tested the oil levels. There's no leaks. We have tested pretty much every part of the car, and have finally come to the conclusion that there's probably a short in the dashboard itself that just kind of causes that light to flicker. Because believe me, if I actually had an oil pressure problem in that car, I'd have blown up that engine a long time ago, because Maggie does go on the track with me sometimes. So that's been a very frustrating thing that we have not been able to diagnose, and Minnie hasn't been able to figure out. And my master certified diagnostics expert husband has not been able to figure that out, and it's driving him crazy. But we have done all the tests to make sure that no, there's not in fact an actual oil pressure problem in the car. But that's a really rare thing, and minis are known for some quirks. So if you see the little genie lamp come on in your car, make sure you get it in very quickly to have that diagnosed and get whatever the problem is repaired, so that you do not lose oil pressure in your engine. And finally, the dreaded, ever popular check engine light. This is the one that actually looks like an engine. Sometimes it's got a little lightning bolt going through it just to make it even more scary. And sometimes it'll say check engine. Sometimes it'll say service engine soon, which is a lot less dire sounding. Sometimes it just says check. Sometimes it doesn't say anything. It just gives you the funky little picture. But this is probably the most misunderstood indicator on the dash, because it can mean so many different things. On some cars, it can mean something as simple as you left the gas cap loose. That used to happen on my mom's car all the time. Some cars have a separate light now that tells you, hey, dummy, you left your gas cap loose. But a lot of them, it's still tied to the check engine light. So if that light comes on right after you have refueled your car, stop and check that, make sure that the gas cap is on fully tight. It's done a little click to make sure that it's, fully locked in there. And then if you drive it, usually a couple of cycles, cycling the engine, you're driving, then shutting off the engine, turning it back on, driving some more, shutting it off, turning it back on. If that light goes out on its own, then you probably know that, oh yeah, you left the gas cap off. I really wish that all cars would have a more helpful light on that. And as the cars are getting more complicated with their computer systems, we are getting access to more information, and they are becoming more helpful in telling us what is wrong with them. But on most cars, you're still going to get that annoying check engine light. And the only way to really know why it's throwing that, it can be so many different things. It can be, sensors. It can be an oxygen sensor. It can be just a variety of things, ranging from annoying, and yeah, you need to get it fixed. It's going to, your emissions aren't quite as good to, oh my God, your engine's about to fail. And if that light is flashing, that absolutely means stop now, pull over, turn it off, call a tow truck. So if ever that check engine light is flashing at you, that means that it's a dire warning and you just need to stop right now. But if it's on and if it's solid, there's just a variety of things it can mean. And so the best thing to do is to get over to a good certified shop and have them plug your car into what's called a scan tool or a code reader. Now, your parts places like Advance and AutoZone and them, they have little kind of baby scan tools that can get just the surface level, very vague information from your car. There's different levels of diagnostics in your car, and the cheapy scan tools that the parts stores have can look at just that surface level. So you might be able to get a vague idea of what's wrong, and it might be able to tell you if that's fairly dire or not. But it's really not helpful in terms of diagnostics. You really need to go to a real shop that has a real scan tool, and you need to make sure that they have a scan tool that can talk to your car, because the European cars, for example, they have a different set of, they call them keys, and it's basically the programs that allows the scan tool to talk to the German cars. And not every shop has that, because the German car manufacturers don't want you to go to independent shops. They want you to come to the dealership, so they make those extraordinarily expensive, and not every technician or shop has those expensive scan tools or knows how to diagnose a German car, because they really are a pain in the butt. So make sure you're taking your car to a shop that is going to have the tool to communicate with your car and know what that means. And what they're going to do is they're going to plug your car in, and the scan tool is then going to spit out several levels of diagnostics. And when the mechanic digs down into that, it can tell you, what that code is. There's a bazillion codes in your car, and it will tell you, what the problem is. The last time I think the check engine light came on Maggie, I took a look at it, and it was talking about the thermostat. And so thermostat was going bad on her. So we had to replace that along with doing some other service. So, it can be a variety of different things. And the only way to know for sure is to get into that either good certified independent shop that has the proper scan tools, or go to the dealership. And yes, most of them are going to charge you some amount of money to plug your car in. The reason is because A, it takes the technician's time to do that, and B, those scan tools cost $20,000. So they have to recover their costs. If it's your mechanic and you have a good relationship, he or she might be nice and do it for you for free, or, take that diagnostic time off your bill if you do the repairs with them. But, it is perfectly reasonable to expect a shop to charge you a fee to plug your car into their very expensive computer and tell you what's wrong. And that's why a lot of people try and skimp on that, and they go to AutoZone or whatever, and they plug it into their little, cheapy, $75 scan tool that really doesn't tell you squat. So I personally think that tends to be a waste of time, and it can risk communicating the wrong thing to you. And you may think, oh, that's no big deal. I can, get away with that for a while, when it is in fact something more serious. It's the difference between, going to, say an urgent care, or those little, where you go to see the nurse at the CVS pharmacy or whatever, and them telling you what's wrong with you, versus going to an actual doctor that's a specialist that can tell you, ooh, okay, there's definitely something more wrong with you. So, don't skimp on that. Find out what is wrong with your car, and hopefully it'll be something simple and not a major expensive fix. But it's always better to know, because the risk of damage to your car is so high, with that light, that you absolutely just need to know what is wrong with it. So those are the main dashboard lights that can come on and cause you all sorts of degrees of anxiety and stress. So the best thing is always to get your car diagnosed by a proper shop and have them plug in that code reader, find out really what's going on. If the brake light comes on, absolutely get that in. It's just not worth taking the risk, because the damage, the cost can be so high, both in terms of the amount of money you have to pay for those repairs, and also if it's something that could cause an accident, and then you're putting your life, the lives of your family members, and the other people on the road at risk. So part of being a responsible driver, a responsible car owner, is getting your car in and making sure it's in good shape. Now, if you have your car serviced regularly by a really good mechanic that is keeping an eye on things, hopefully these lights will not come on. They will not surprise you. But the reality is sometimes parts wear out and the car doesn't, give us any heads up that this is happening until it reaches the point where the computer notices something is wrong and it sets off one of these lights to tell you, hey, I need help. Something's wrong with me. So when it does, take it seriously, get your car in. I want everybody to always be safe, drive safely, and keep your car in good shape so that it will last you for as long as you need it to, and you'll get the most money out of your ownership of the vehicle. I am headed to the Charlotte International Auto Show starting tomorrow. I'm going to be crawling through all 400 odd makes and models. There's a lot of new and fully redesigned cars on the market for 2019, and hopefully a lot of those cars will in fact be at our auto show, and I will be doing my video review of that, giving my pick of the show, and also the infamous WTF award, and you know what that stands for, folks. So I will be doing my next podcast on that review, and I'll have a video, so check out my website, thecarchick.com, and all those things will be posted, and you can see what the new exciting stuff is for 2019. Drive safely, everyone. I'm out of here.
The Straight Shift podcast is copyright Leanne Shattuck, The Car Chick, 2017. All views expressed by guest and or co-hosts are those of the guest and or co-hosts, and not necessarily those of Leanne Shattuck or The Car Chick.